I'm gonna do my best to get this one complete in 10 minutes. But and as soon as we say 10 minutes, we're a little bit limited because now we're thinking about time. But so I was speaking with my close sibling today, and we had a discussion that so my sibling is very taciturn, and a lot of times he chooses to to he has a lot of words for people that he likes, and he has no words for people that 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 he doesn't enjoy. And so I was telling him that um, but we're actually to the point. I think that we're not meant to be stuck with our family all of our life, and that's actually the standpoint of having a healthy relationship is having our own thing going on because it is a part of nature to leave the nest at one point. And both him and myself took longer to leave the nest than a lot of people, and that might reflect some of the challenges that have actually haunted us a lot of our life and are still with us to the present day, and how difficult it can be to exit a family system if you sustain maybe setbacks or disadvantages there, or just something that impacted your confidence. It can be difficult to transcend that next beyond difficult almost, because life is difficult, freedom is difficult, but then intimacy is also difficult. So if you're in a family, you have implications of life, freedom, and intimacy, just in sharing living quarters and experiences. That's one of the most difficult things to transcend. But in the modern paradigm, as we're faced with dauntless and remorseless inflation, and also rigors and duties within that, as we always have, but then the inflation on top of that, you need a degree of you need a standpoint and a footing to maintain any form of independence and viability as a person, as an adult, period, in modern society, but especially in the modern terms. So it's always been difficult to land on your feet as an adult and stand as an adult. It has always been difficult. So a lot of people would talk about like becoming like a white collar or a entertainer or a politician or something outstanding, but how outstanding is it to have your life together? And some people at those higher grades of what's appreciated as the trappings of success, they actually don't have the footing of stability, and they don't entirely have their life together, though they may have resources and balance and resources and wealth. Some of that might actually be outside of balance, and therefore not serve them, and therefore put them in an exact compromise and difficult position, even as outstanding and astronomical as some of their metrics of success are. A person with solid footing and balance, that has their life together. If you have your life together and you don't have to do things you don't want to do, and you get to do things you enjoy, and you can keep a roof over your head and get to where you need to be when you need to be, and you can afford a decent meal while you're doing that for yourself, and then seldom maybe share an experience with another person, you are doing far and away outstanding. And I would go better with that than something fancy that doesn't serve me or that injures me, whether fame or fortune. But but it's difficult, and it's difficult as it's always been, and it's difficult to the present day. I've nearly cleared a lot of that as far as just having my own life together within what challenges I still have and duties I still have. Because I've made other videos about duty can be arbitrary and not serve our best interests or even others. But we do have certain things that we need to do for ourselves, and therefore for others and for ourselves as we're existing on earth, because we are interdependent, I think. But I was talking to my family, and I was saying that so I had a friend a person in my life who was of a real faith background, and she walked with faith, such that a lot of people, like, even though like my brother, sometimes he'll be taciturn, or he'll be like he'll like, I've had family that say, wow, you're so macho, if you're half as macho as you look, and that's a little bit like gassing him up. But and that can actually affect family dynamics when people indulge or flatter a member of a family. It can skew the dynamics in that family, and that's been my experience. But as macho as like my brother would be, or like he has like well-to-do friends, and I imagine they go to like well-to-do venues. As macho and tough and sexy and adult as a lot of adults are, a lot of them still relish in and fancy their own birthday as though they were 5 and 4 years old. But my friend in my life, this woman, she converted to a different faith that was outside of her culture and ethnic heritage, because she believed in it, and I think she loved someone that believed in it, and they inspired her to do so. And she walked away from celebrating her birthday because, in the strictest sense, is that's somehow outside of faith in that sense. And so so she walked away from, she doesn't celebrate birthdays, and she doesn't miss them or make any bones about that. And then she also wears the markings, she dons the attire and clothing of religious connotation, and walks with that to show what type of faith she has. And but she said that in her understanding of faith is that one thing that is an actual sin is to turn one's back on one's family, one next of kin. Not to exit a family system, to be independent, to leave a family. That's not a sin, but to turn your back, that is to refuse to engage when there is some level of engagement that would be necessary to equitably exist together or equitably go separate ways. To shun a person as they're attempting to do what's right and exit to do right by themselves and another in exiting, that's actually a sin because it's a disservice to that person, and we are yet one person, so it's also a disservice to ourselves. So that we're disserving ourselves is what the real sin is, and she enunciated that, and I was explaining that to a family member, and also saying that as a member of a family, you are connected to your family members whether you appreciate it or not, whether you recognize it or not, at least physically, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, personally is your history, and then you could say etherically that'd be like, maybe I can't exactly enunciate that, but it's a little bit distinct from spiritually. Etheric would be a little bit different than spiritual. Etheric might be like our subtle dimension that's beyond the ken, that's a range of our understanding of gross physical matter. It might be etheric. Then all that within all that is spiritual, and the simplest understanding of spiritual is that it has to do with breath. It's informed by breath. All of life is informed by breath and not viable for a moment without breath, because breath is actually the unity of what we share our life force together. And that might be what's so spiritual about sunrise and sunset, is that that's all of us up there in the air, past, present, and future. But you can't just simply pretend as though that doesn't exist without doing violence that is disservice to yourself and who you're connected to. So we have to do right to enter and exit relationships humanely, without sinning. But then, and this is not a religious channel, but what I was saying to my family member is that according to Arthur Avalon, that is the spiritual pseudonym, collective spiritual pseudonym employed by the Knight of England, Sir John Woodroffe, serving at that time of publishing as a High Justice of the Court of Indian and a scholar of different hermetics, sages, gurus, ascetics, and initiates of different faith walks around India, at least. He was saying that were a person to able to enunciate what karma is, from that standpoint, that would constitute a person that's distinct and somewhat beyond what you would consider a mortal being or or ordinary limited individual. Is that level to articulate that would constitute a degree of learning that would have to be attended by self-culture, rigors, sacrifices, mercies, that would constitute a faith walk such that that person would be perceived by the broader existence, and then also themselves, which is informed by and a part of the broader existence, as distinct from an ordinary member of a cohort who has not yet reached that point. And that's a degree of distinction and even class, for lack of a better word, that's significant were a person to enunciate what karma is. Also, energy. I think that many people would have difficulty enunciating what energy is, but then also karma. But if I were to enunciate both energy and karma in one word, I would be just simply to say cycle. But but the distinction is that karma as a word, it implies moral judgments. That is a sense of good and bad, right and wrong. But that takes discretion. That takes license. Actually, license is like the freedom to do things that affect other people. It takes license to do that. So sometimes my family member, they're pissed off at another family member when I was talking to that. Yeah, but so and so is an alcoholic. When you say alcoholic, you're actually employing a clinical term. You're applying a clinical term to a person from, for lack of a better word, your armchair or your lack of training. Because whatever you're aware of, there would have to be oversights if you haven't got to the point of having an actual license to operate and affix a title, a designation, a ignoble title, a condemnation, that is a label, in a classification, a diagnosis to another person. That would actually require a license to do that in clinical terms. Were you to do so in religious terms, that person that said that, they still actually interface with and touch alcohol. Were you to touch alcohol at any point, or even to reprimand your own parent at all, whether or not with their shortcomings, from a religious standpoint, you're actually you're bogus from that from a religious standpoint, because you should always be under authority in religion, and you shouldn't be vouching anything outside of someone's authority, not the least of which are your own, if you haven't earned it in a religious setting. So you wouldn't be viable to say that in a clinical sense or a religious sense